Recently, as most of you now know, Cloudy Beale, Mrs. Beale, was awarded life membership here of the Women's Auxiliary of the RSL. And Cloudy, as I recall, this is about only the 45th time it's happened in Australia.
Yes, that is so.
This must be a terrific honour. It must feel great to receive such a thing. But you earned it, don't you? You needn't hold it. I'll hold this.
Well, when I got the news that I was going up to the club to be presented with the medal, I felt a bit like the old woman in the nursery rhyme, "Can this be I?" But I do realise the honour it was, the bestowal of such a thing. Also, I'm still wondering what I did to deserve it.
Well, there are many that know that you did do something to deserve it, because these things don't come lightly, and it had to go through a lot of channels before it finally came back. Also, I believe it was a great night. They allowed me to go to sleep at home, and I was to come down and record it myself, but I believe you got a beautiful bouquet of flowers from the Navy boys, and plenty of telegrams too.
I think the thing that pleased me most of all about the whole thing was the number of friends I've met that have walked down the years with me that turned up. Also, another thing that was very lovely to me was that all my auxiliary girls were right there with me at the table. And the flowers were very beautiful. And the telegrams, I think they were most unexpected. I didn't realise or think that I would get such things, and they were unexpected, but nonetheless appreciated. And the RSL members, the whole of them, were more than kind.
Well, that's one good night, one that you'll long remember, and you'll have something to show for it too when you finally receive the citation. But now, you mentioned having walked down the years with many friends. Who are some of the friends over the years, some of the characters that you've met that you might recall at this stage?
Well, I don't know whether he'll thank me for it or not, but I was especially pleased to see Reg and Marge Harris there that night. And many years ago, when I was employed by the Commonwealth Bank, Reg and Marge used to open their homes to the bank boys and myself, and it was a very pleasing thing to me to see Reg and Marge there. Also Margaret Baker, who seldom appears at any of those things. Also Mrs. Hassett. Oh, many of them. But although it was the opening of the TV and there were functions on all over the town, I took it as a special compliment that those people gave up their time to come to the hall that night.
Well, once before, I think about 6 months ago, we had a bit of a chat here, and you've been up here for a pretty fair time. Casting your mind back, who are some of the characters that you've met? No, I don't mean Reg Harris.
Oh, well, we'll cut Reg out. It's always hard to think when there's a mic shoved at you and someone's listening. But I think maybe old George Hayes from Neutral Junction was one of the characters that I'll long remember. Also, Mr. Birchmore from Corundy. They're all station people, but at that time they were the kind of the people that I mixed with most. And I think Mr. Hayes from Undoolia was a character to remember. If you sat down and listed them and thought about it, I think you would tell a lot of tales, but just offhand, those are three that I can remember.
There's usually a good reason there for remembering, say, someone like George Hayes. What sort of a man was he?
Well, he was rather an ill-tempered man. If anything didn't please him, he'd just tell you straight out. And as I said once before on an ABC interview, he had two hates in his life. Anyone that pinched his cattle, and anyone who came from the top end, and now I quote, they were referred to as bloody top-enders. No, nothing they did could possibly be any good. They could have no decent motives whatsoever if they came from the top end.
He was firmly fixed in this idea. These people, you say that he said what was on his mind. I find with the true Territorians, and these are few, that these people do say what they feel or say nothing at all, but as often as not they'll express their view.
That was a backhander. Well, anyway, when I first came to the Territory 40-odd years ago, I realised that almost at once, that if you couldn't speak straight and say what you meant without any undue preamble, well, you'd better shut up altogether.
This pinching of cattle, I believe this was a reasonably common thing in days gone by.
Well, I would imagine it still is if they're sure they won't be caught. But it was a very common thing. In fact, nasty-minded people have said that many pastoralists started their farms or their holdings or their what have you on the unbranded cattle. I hope I won't offend anyone with this, but I have heard it said, and frankly I don't doubt it.
On the other hand, if they're all duffing each other's cattle, it'll probably all come out even.
I think they did. I on one occasion, George Hayes, we were all at the Barrow Creek races. George came in contact with a bloody top-ender by name Jimmy Fowler, a drover. And Jimmy knew of this antagonism of George's towards top-enders and cattle duffers and what not, and he invited George to have tea with him at his camp that night. And I suppose George was in a benign mood, full of beer and good cheer, and he accepted. And after the meal, Jimmy asked him what did he think of the steak. And very graciously, Mr. Hayes said, oh, it wasn't bad for top-end stuff. It was virtually one of George's beasts that Jimmy had shot and butchered.
Oh dear. Oh dear, there must have been some wonderful people though in those days.
They were very wonderful. They still are when you can catch up to them. But they seem to be, well, I suppose with modern progress and the town moving at the rate it undoubtedly is, they're in the minority.
What I like about these fellas now, as you know, Fred Elliott's wife is just back from an overseas trip and the daughter came back last week, so Fred's taking off for a holiday now, and his idea of a holiday is he's going for 4 months all round the bush.
Good luck to him. I'd like to be going with them.
So would I, by golly, and it's a pity that I can't, because I could meet a lot of these people and put them on record. I think it'd be great, but still, that's one of the things. Time, isn't it?
Lack of time,
yep.
Bill, maybe you mean.
That's what I do mean, yeah. Right, now that's George Hayes. Any of the other fellas that you remember because of some quirk or whatever?
It's so hard just offhand to remember these things. I very vividly recall meeting Miss Pink.
Tell me something. I've heard a lot about Miss Pink and I haven't yet had the opportunity of meeting her.
She came here as an anthropologist, and I don't know why she gave that up, or if she did give it up, I think with advancing years maybe it became too much for her, because she used to live out bush studying the natives. But now she rings me up frequently, and she's 88 years of age. But she's a woman with a brilliant brain, and even though she's 88, she's still conversant with world topics and the daily news. She's an astounding person, really.
Wonder if one day we could invite her around to your place and have a cup of coffee, and I might have a chat with her, do you think?
You and she would be more than welcome, and I would like it too, but I doubt if she'd come we could ask.
Would you?
Mm.
All right. Now, there's something that crossed my mind. Oh, yes, you mentioned her brilliant brain. This has really staggered me, I must say this, that of nearly all of the Territorians that I've had the pleasure of meeting, some I've interviewed, some just wouldn't be in it. There's one fellow the other day, I won't mention his name at the moment. I have yet to get him. But I don't know whether they had much schooling, but they all are so perceptive and they have good brains.
I think living out in the bush like that teaches you to be keener. It sharpens your wits. I mean, there's lots of times when it's your wits that get you by, or it was in the old days, and I think that you become quicker to think and hear and see. It sharpens you up generally, because you know that, you've got to get by. There's no one going to hold your hand. You're on your own in the bush, and I think it just makes you keener all round. But nevertheless, Miss Pink holds degrees, and she is a remarkably clever woman.
Well, again, many people who are well educated and hold degrees, etc., do find their way to the Territory.
Yes, I don't know why that is. I think I do. If you live here for a while, it gets you. There's something. On one occasion, after living here for many years, I packed up and went away. And I think I was away about 3 months, and I moved heaven and earth to get back again, and here I am ever since.
Well, that's one of those indefinable things up here. I think if you do like the place, that's it. You really fall for the place, and it does get you, as you say.
You either like it a lot or you dislike it intensely, and if you like it, you stay, and if you go away, you come back.
It was said the other day to me that tourism is sort of ruining the place. Well, this is part of the pattern of living, I'm afraid. We need the tourists if we want to expand. On the other hand, it does. You lose a lot of the old face of the Alice itself. But I don't think you can destroy the soul of a place like this.
I don't think the tourists are to blame for.
These weren't my words, by the way.
No, I don't agree with that. I don't think the tourists are spoiling anything, except that they're apt to sit in judgment on the place itself rather harshly, but I don't think they're spoiling anything. Frankly, I don't see how they can. They're maybe the chalets and tourist stopping places don't interfere with anybody, and the tourists themselves, any that I've met, seem perfectly amenable to reason. I don't see that they're spoiling anything, and in fact I think they must have brought a good deal of money into the country.
They must indeed. No, I've never yet met a tourist who hasn't loved their stay, whether short or long, here in Alice Springs or in the Territory. But as you say, too many, I think, form an opinion of conditions without going too deeply into it, and go back and speak authoritatively about something you couldn't possibly know without living here, not for months, but for some years.
Yes, it is a pity that they do rush into those statements, particularly, I think, regarding the natives. I've heard some very harsh criticism about the treatment of the natives. Well, I think that's unjust, and they're in no position to pass a judgment.
This is true. This is lack of knowledge, and it's always sad to hear statements made from Canberra from some blokes that have very often not even been near the Territory.
Yes, I think that's quite true too, and even having been near the Territory, they don't see all that's being done. They don't, for instance, see or know the money that's been spent on outlying settlements. They don't go into the schools and see the children side by side with everybody else's children. They don't come onto the sports field on Saturday afternoon and see the native boys and girls in professional sports gear playing near professional sport. they don't see those things. And if they were so badly treated, well, it's dead certain they wouldn't be doing that, would they?
That's very true. Well, again, it's people trying to sell papers and etc. down south, because a good, sharp reporter can always get some words and very smartly bolt them into a great big article, which means absolutely nothing. Now, you wanted to say hello to Mr. Sandeman, I think, because he had some unfortunate thing. He forgot to turn on a switch or something.
Indeed, he did. We had a rather troubled time while he was here. There was telephone rang and there were people at the door, and some way or other the switch wasn't turned on, and he went away so delighted with his recording and so proud of it, and I was pleased. He was a delightful person to meet, and then I understood from Mr. Lucas, who accompanied him, that the switch had not been turned on and the recording was an absolute blank. Well, this interview, by courtesy of Mr. Barnes from 8HA, is in the nature of a New Year greeting to Mr. and Mrs. Sandy. He insisted on being called Sandy. So this is to Mr. and Mrs. Sandy from Cloudy, a New Year greeting, and we hope that the interview will please him. Well, I hope it's what he wanted.
Well, it's Sandy and Cloudy. How long do I have to live here before you call me Bill?
Well, I think once along the line during the interview I did call you Bill. I always call you Bill.
Except that just then you called me Mr. Barnes. It makes me feel real old.
No, I was being proper to...
Cloudy, thanks again for having me around here. I've had coffee and Vicky's. It's always a delight to come here, and always a delight to see you, and I guess next time I see you will be down at the RSL.
I guess. It's a very good place to go.
Righto. Thanks a lot, Cloudy.